Welcome back, guys. I have now been joined with the last two members of the committee that put the time capsule in Branson, Missouri. On my right is most excellent companion, Robert Schlichter, past Grand High Priest of Royal Archmasons of the state of Missouri, 1998-1999. On my left is Bobby, most excellent companion, Bobby I knew I was going to mispronounce your name.
Illustrious companion.
Illustrious companion, Bobby
Detherow.
Detherow. He is the past Grand Illustrious Master of Cryptic Masons of the state of Missouri, also from 1998 and 1999. He is also the chairman of the committee for the time capsule. Thank you guys for joining me. Let's start from the very beginning. As I visited the monument, all your names was here. Your original committee involved yourself, you two, and also Right Excellent Sir Knight James Gibbons, past Grand Commander of Knights Templar of the state of Missouri from 1998 and 1999.
Right eminent.
Right Eminent. And Most Worshipful Brother Jimmy D. Lee, Ancient Free and Accepted Masons of the state of Missouri, Grand Master for 2002 and 2003.
Right.
Also, it said the monument site was provided by Melvin Hall and Roland Zimwalt, which they both showed as 32nd degree Scottish Rite Masons. Is that correct?
I think his name's Ronald.
Ronald, I apologize, yes.
I think Marvin was Grand Cross.
Yeah.
He was the illustrious Grand Cross
Yeah.
of the Scottish Rite.
Okay.
Right.
Also, they showed the property was dedicated on May 14th of 1999, and according to the pictures that you provided, the time capsule was put in on May 13th of the year 2000. I guess, well, let's take it back to the basics. How did this all start about putting a time capsule in Branson? I'll let whichever one of you guys like to talk, as you both are laughing.
Bob and I had talked about this all the years that we were in line together, about putting a time capsule someplace. We didn't really know where at the time, but we knew what we wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I got together, and now you can tell.
Well, we met several times here in Branson
Yeah.
and had 2 or 3 discussions. We also met in Springfield at various meetings that both of us attended. And then somewhere along the line, we decided we were going to include Dr. Gibbons, since he was the Grand Commander. Up until that point in time, our year, Bobby, mine, and Jim Gibbons, the commandery was off to the side. In other words, the York Rite was split. Bobby contacted me one evening. I was working here in Branson, and Bobby called me one evening and asked if I would consider putting the Grand York Rite back together and including Jim in the preparation of the time capsule and preparation of the Grand Session. And at that time, I was still a little bit opposed to that, but we had meeting after meeting after meeting right here in Branson. And actually probably 5 or 6. And one evening, he called, I was here, and because I worked here a lot in 91, 92, 93, 94, 90, all the way through 98. And he said, "Can we get together?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm staying," give him the name of the hotel where I was, and said, "Come on down," said, "We'll have a chat." Well, we chatted about 15 or 20 minutes, and Bobby said to me, "Jim needs our help." And I did it.
Okay.
We put it together, and it included the time capsule at the time, and I think that was about, Jim and Bobby had been talking about the time capsule without me for a time. And
Behind closed doors.
not really, because I was surprised at everything that they were talking about. And so we just stuck it all together, all in one shot.
And it also is that when Jimmy Lee joined into the mix?
Jimmy Lee was in there long before that.
Okay.
Jimmy Lee came in there about, oh gosh, 3, 4, 5 years before we actually got down to doing the planning for this thing.
Okay. So when did the planning actually take off for putting the time capsule in?
Oh my,
When
we
you got-
started, I'll pick that up, Bobby. We started, Bobby and I started talking about this, as he says, when we went on the Grand Line. Because we both went on the Grand Line at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there was a year's difference there. But anyway, we were both on the Grand Line. And we'd started talking about it years before we ever actually put it together,
Right.
fruition. So it was like an ongoing plan. It wasn't like something that just came up spur of the moment or
Right.
yesterday and we're doing it today.
Right.
The real planning, I guess, started in the year before we were the heads of the body.
Okay.
Where we started about getting how the design, the location.
Okay.
We knew we wanted it here.
Okay.
That was, I think, that was a given. That it was going to be here.
Okay.
And I'll let Bobby pick it up.
Yeah, and so we needed a location. We decided it was gonna be in Branson,
Okay.
and, but we needed a location. So I just happened to know Ron Zumwalt and Melvin Hall.
Uh-huh.
And so I contacted Ron, and I said, I said, do you have a property down there? Of course, I knew he did. And over Shepherd of the Hills in 65, he says, yeah, I says, we own that. I said, fantastic. I said, we need a 10 by 10 foot space to put a time capsule down there. Can I come talk to you about it? And he said, yes. So he and Melvin and I sat down and talked. And he finally, when he heard about it, he looked over at Melvin and he says, we ought to do this. And I said, that sounds good. Well, I knew it was going to be expensive,
Mm-hmm.
very expensive. At that time, it's something like $12,500. That's what it was going to cost us to do it.
To get the property
The property and the time capsule,
okay.
monument, the whole
thing.
Now that wouldn't have cost, well, actually the property itself, I didn't know what that was gonna cost us.
But that, the monument and the time capsule and all that part
That
of
was
it.
12.5, yeah. And so we talked about it, and he said, okay, he says, I'm gonna need you some property right there for the time capsule, 10 by 10. I said, that's fine. So he did. He and Ron Zumwalt wrote out a paper, had the paper signed, sealed, and delivered to me, and I give it to Kevin Sample, along with all the papers, after we got this done. But anyway, when we got ready to do the monument, I went to Womack Monument Company in Bolivar, Missouri, and talked to the owner there and told him what we was wanting to do. And I said, what would it take, what would it cost us to do a monument, and told him what it looked like. We decided it was gonna look like the Washington Monument, okay?
Okay.
And then put all the names
Right.
on the thing. And so I told him about what we wanted, and he told me, I said, well, that's about $7,500. I said, okay. So I didn't have $7,500. So I went back to Melvin and Ron, and I said, if you could help us out, so we'd appreciate it. And Melvin says, what do we just pay for it? Thank you, sir.
Wow.
And so the next stage was getting the dump truck, getting the people that was going to sit the monument down for us. And a contractor, local contractor here, and I don't remember his name, I'm sorry, but he says, want to know what we're going to do? And I said, told him. He says, it won't cost you anything for me to do that. So,
Masonic Brotherhood, whether they
Really?
are or not.
yeah, and he was a Mason. I just don't.
He was a Mason.
He was
Oh,
a
was he?
Mason. Yeah. He's the Mason here,
Uh-huh.
local, and I think he belonged to Branson Lodge.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was a nice guy, and he came in and he looked at it and he said, okay, he says, we'll just do this. And so So when it really come down to it, it didn't cost the Yorkite a penny for the property, for the monument, for the time, for the laying of the capsule, any of it. It was actually all paid for by, and donated,
Right.
Donated.
and donated.
We had some donations too.
Yeah, we did,
Yeah.
had some donations for it.
In fact, we had asked the chapters, councils, and commanders in Missouri if they would make a contribution to it. And several of them did.
Okay.
Not
Fantastic.
I'm not talking about large sums, but several of them did make
Right.
a donation.
Yeah, because we needed to buy the casket, we needed to buy it.
Yeah.
It's like opening up and all this
Yeah.
stuff and all this stuff, so that, but, yeah, all of it was actually donated. And when we got ready to present it to the Grand Yorkite bodies, I had some opposition. A most illustrious companion, friend, he was really concerned, because I told him what $12,500 is what it was gonna cost. And he was really concerned about it. He got up and he made a couple of, he talked a while. And finally I said, most illustrious, I said, it's all paid for. Well, that made the whole.
That smooths it off a lot real quick. Let's get to, okay, we talked about the history of how we got it and how it came here, which saves, that clears up a lot for me, because I'd heard multiple rumors of different things that happened. The contents that's in it, I'm not gonna ask for a full list, but kind of some of the highlights that's actually in it.
We do have a full list, or we did have a full list, and we made it as it was being deposited and donated.
Okay.
My understanding is that went to Kevin also.
Kevin also.
Okay, so we did maintain a full list. Most of the items, not all, but most of the items were Masonically related
Right.
to the different organizations. The Grand Lodge of Missouri cleaned down to the shrine.
Uh-huh.
Even the shrine made
Yeah.
contributions.
That brings up a good point, because I'd like to talk about that, plus the day of the dedication. On the pictures, and I have taken a picture of the pictures, and I will maybe try to expand on it and be able to show the different pictures, or be able to scan them in where we can be able to put them in a longer video that you can see at Grand Session. I'll set up a video outside of everything that goes on. It brings up 2 points when I saw the pictures. One, this is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is not a Yorkite time capsule. This is celebrating the Masonic bodies of the state of Missouri in whole, as a sign of unity, including the youth groups.
Yes,
That's correct.
that's correct.
And that's the misnomer. That's one of the things I like to try to clear up with this, is that this was not Yorkite saying this is us, and not anybody else, but a sign of unity that needed to happen between the bodies.
We did.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I also like to see, I like the fact that I also see the youth groups are on there. All 3 of the youth groups are represented. The picture of the actual, when they actually did the dedication or the time capsule being present, I didn't look at it that closely. You look like there was quite a few people here. You want to talk about that day?
Go ahead.
Did they do a regular?
Bobby and I, and indeed a little bit of Jim Gibbons, or maybe more than a little bit of Jim Gibbons, put together a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby did the initial writing of it. I did some correcting to it. Jim did some correcting to it. Jim Gibbons did some correcting to it. Bobby rewrote the thing. And I forget there was somebody else involved in that editing or that review.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we put a ritual together that had never been done before. And on the day that was dedicated, Bobby and I and Jim Gibbons and Jeff took parts,
Mm-hmm.
because each one of us had been assigned a part. I looked for my copy of that and I can't find it. I'm sure Bob has still got one, but
Somewhere.
I don't know where I put mine. But it was a joint effort and I think meant to impress and to indicate that we were a joint Masonic body,
Mm-hmm.
cohesively.
Right,
And that was what the entire thing was about to begin with.
right.
Yeah.
Did you have something that you wanted to add to it?
No, it's a unity thing,
Yeah.
basically, it's what we wanted to unify.
Right.
And at that time, there was a little bit of friction between the York Rite and the other bodies.
Right.
But after this was done, this seemed to disappear.
Well, I also, Robert also mentioned that all three of the different shrine areas in the state of Missouri was represented in somehow.
Yeah.
And different York Rite bodies, as you said, Commandery and all them made donations and chapters and councils.
Correct.
What about how much input did Grand Lodge have, or did they want and be involved with it?
The Grand Lodge was, they were involved with it through Jimmy D. Lee,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
At that time, he would have been what, Grand Senior Warden? Does that sound about right?
I think he was Grand Master.
Oh, that wasn't until 2 years later.
No, that's right, you're right, he was Grand Senior Warden.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was Grand Senior Warden.
We drew him in because, well, to be honest, we liked him.
Well, that's something else that you brought up to me is all of you lived in different parts of the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
You know, I know you live up in north of Columbia,
Right.
and you're here in the Springfield area, and Jimmy was Kansas City,
No,
Springfield,
Springfield, yeah, he was actually Rogersville.
Rogersville,
But that's,
and then what in Gibbons?
he was.
That's him, Jim Gibbons. Yeah.
Okay, and Jimmy Lee was
He was at, I think he was in Rogersville.
but it just wasn't people around here putting it together. Is what I'm saying.
No, we
No.
had input, a lot of input.
Yeah.
Okay.
We discussed it in chapters, councils, and
Commanderies.
commanderies, whenever we visited or we talked about what we were planning on doing, which I don't know if they believed us or not. But we talked about it.
Hey,
They
did y'all
probably do now.
Yeah.
what about OES and the youth groups? Did they have much input?
Not really so much input if you're talking about monetarily.
Well, no, just in general.
But we did have input from the Order of the Eastern Star. We had some input from DeMolay,
Mm-hmm.
because if I remember right, the head of that was from Springfield.
Yeah,
And Bobby was on the
I was the chapter dad,
yeah, exactly, the chapter.
Okay.
yeah,
So,
Farnsworth chapter.
and I had spoken with Job's daughters and
Rainbow.
DeMolay. No, I didn't get a chance to talk to Rainbow.
I did.
But, yeah.
Okay. And how about the representation in the picture? I know I've talked to people up in the Independence, Kansas City area that remember us being here for the dedication. Was most of the state represented? Different parts of the state?
Very much so.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Very much so. And you have to remember that we were trying to put together a grand session too.
Mm-hmm. Going on at the same
And
time.
so we had quite a bit of representation from around the state.
In fact, we did have a sign-in sheet that went to Kevin also.
Yeah.
So he has all the names,
Of everybody that was.
everybody that's in these pictures.
Okay. And I know that, well, May 14th is the 25th anniversary of the time capsule, of the dedication of the property. And so that's what we're going with that date with, not when the actual time capsule was put in. Looking back from now 25 years ago, what's your thoughts of the project?
I think it was a good project. I still think it's a good project. I think it needs a little bit more support from Grand York Rite and Grand Lodge, Missouri. That's my opinion.
I agree with that. I think that part of that's probably our fault
True.
because we haven't promoted it as it should have probably been promoted.
Mm-hmm.
After we went out, of course, we were, once you're a has-been, you're a has-been.
What'd you say, Brian?
And we really didn't promote it like we should have. I think it should be promoted because it's 25 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a successful event down here. It was to have this time capsule. We just didn't talk about it as much. Like most Masons, we keep secrets.
Yeah.
Well, and I've heard, I visit a lot out of state to other grandyard back bodies. And I've heard comments from people that I visit with out of state that have been here to visit because they come to Branson. The very first incident, I guess, was in about 2001, 2002. I was visiting the grandyard black body in Louisiana. And I mentioned the time capsule. You have a time capsule. And where is it in Branson? Well, we get to Branson. Told them where it was. The next session that I made down there, everybody knew about the time capsule in Missouri because those guys had come to visit. We've had visitors from Kansas come visit our time capsule because they come to Branson and partake of the events here in Branson. Once they know that the time capsule is there, I was there a year ago, I think is when I sent you the last photos, or maybe it was 2 years ago. And a couple come driving up, that's in the filling station parking lot. And a couple came driving up, and I was taking photos to send to him. And the lady asked me, "What is this?" So I explained it to her. And she was absolutely fantastically awed that Masons would do such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, ma'am, I said, we are not the only one. There's also one in Colorado, Pikes Peak. I'll give them a shot. Okay. And there are several around the nation, but we just don't advertise those, and I think that's what our issue has been here in Missouri. We don't do it enough.
Recently, the triennial, as you know, was held here in Branson. As we had people from all over the world here in Branson, I was spreading the word about it and showing pictures of it. And for the first time in the history, in the 25 years that time capsule has been here, the setting Grand Master, the setting High Priest, the setting Illustrious Master, and the setting Grand Commander were there together. And had a picture taken of all four of them together for the first time. Including the Grand Master did not know it was here. So I challenged him to put it to his advancing officers to have them come and check the time capsule, just as our presiding officers needs to do each year. I say almost they have to, but it's requested that they do.
Not requested, it's law.
It's law.
It's law, yeah.
It is not
Okay.
a request.
I'm going to look.
I wrote it.
I know, I was gonna say you wrote nice.
As we get ready to close, there's a couple of things I want to touch on with you guys. What would you say to the future? The people that would see this 10, 15 years from now, when we are no longer around.
Remember why the thing was put together to begin with. To forecast and to support unity in the Masonic order. That's why the whole thing was developed to begin with. That's what he and I talked about, and eventually Jim Gibbons got in on that conversation and bought off on it too. That's what needs to be projected. The unity of the Masonic order, and that includes starting with the Grand Lodge of Missouri on up to the Shrine, includes the youth groups, it includes the Scottish Rite, because we had Scottish Rite representatives here too.
Yeah.
Includes the Order of the Eastern Star, every facet of Masonry.
Right. Something that I have started talking about and thinking about as we close this thing is that, and part of the reason why I record history the way I do is I want to be able to show the past so we can see where we came from. Because in my mind, we all begin our journey the same way, at the same altar, taking the same obligation. And no matter whether you're a past Grand Illustrious Master, whether you're a past Grand High Priest, past Grand Commander, or past Grand Master of the state, you all started your journey the exact same way.
Exactly.
That's exactly.
And that's what we need to remember in our heart. And that's why I want to thank you guys for having the courage and the foresight to think into the future and understand what even then that we needed to show unity between the bodies.
And that all began because of a past Grand Master whose name I'm not going to mention again, Bobby Deathrow. If it hadn't been for Bobby Deathrow, and that was done on a telephone call, I might add. In fact, he ran me down to get to put it out to me. But he found me, and the discussion over the telephone was like not even 10 minutes. And that's exactly where it started from. It started with Bob Deathrow.
I got an idea.
Well,
He did have an idea, and it was a good idea. And it, as far as I'm concerned, it worked really well, and should continue to work.
it was my phone call, but it was our idea because we worked together
Very true.
on it.
We did, yes.
And I hope they continue within the bodies, will continue to maintain and take care of this sacred piece of property. It's down here in the Ozarks. It's in a beautiful part of the country, and it's, you know, the surroundings aren't the world's greatest, but it is. But I also noticed with that piece of property, I do not know how many. Now this will be my final statement. I don't know how many people actually realize the Masonic connection of where that property is. Have you realized it?
Where it is?
Yeah, it is in the northeast corner of the parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where all education should begin is within the northeast corner.
That hadn't dawned on me, but you're right.
Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the time. And once again, I'm glad to be able to connect 25 years ago to today and looking into the future.
And somehow, we have to promulgate that for the next 25 years.
I'm hoping that this will reiterate to them of what has happened in the 25 years in the past, that we now look for 25 years in the future for the 50th anniversary, and after that, until they can actually bring the time capsule back up.
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Guys, there's a piece of history that's being discussed right here, and looking forward to the future. Thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.